Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I want to share a story that reminds us that true wealth is not measured in money, but in the kindness we carry. Stay with me, because what happens in this small coffee shop will touch your heart. On a calm mid-morning, sunlight streaming gently through the wide front windows of a small espresso shop that sat comfortably between a florist and a vintage bookstore, the day seemed quiet and unhurried, with just a handful of customers enjoying their drinks, the soft aroma of roasted coffee beans drifting delightfully through the air, when the front door swung open with a sudden force, causing the small bell hanging above it to ring sharply. A wealthy businessman stepped inside, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that hugged his figure in a way that spoke of expensive fabric and renowned craftsmanship, the kind of clothing that was meant not only to be worn, but to be seen and admired. His posture was confident, perhaps too confident, and the way he held his phone to his ear suggested that whoever was on the other end was merely a prop for the performance he was staging for the entire shop. He spoke loudly, exceptionally loudly, his voice booming with dramatic emphasis, as though he were speaking in a boardroom filled with executives rather than in a cozy cafe where people were quietly sipping their morning drinks, trying to relax before the day truly began. Every word he spoke was calculated to impress. Figures, deals, business expansions, names of influential people he claimed to know personally, each syllable dropped like a stone meant to draw attention to him, to his importance, to his success. He wasn't just talking on the phone, he was announcing himself to the world, demanding acknowledgement without ever directly asking for it. Behind him, the door opened once more, this time with the gentlest sway, the bell above it chiming softly in contrast. In stepped a humble janitor, his clothes clean but worn from years of faithful use, his shoes slightly scuffed at the edges, bearing the marks of long hours spent walking, working, serving. In his hands, he carried a weathered Bible, its edges frayed, its pages softened by time, touch, and reverent use. His presence did not command attention. In fact, one might not even have noticed him unless they were paying close attention, for he moved with the quiet grace of someone who has spent a lifetime blending into backgrounds, doing work that is necessary but rarely praised. He did not look around to see who noticed him, nor did he react to the booming voice of the businessman. He simply made his way to a small table in the corner, placed his Bible carefully on the wooden surface, and took his seat with humility. Before touching the small meal he had brought with him, a simple sandwich wrapped carefully in paper, he bowed his head and began to pray softly. His lips moved gently, his voice so faint it was barely audible, a private conversation with his creator in the midst of a public space. But the businessman noticed him. And once he noticed, he could not look away. Something about the quiet peace of the janitor seemed to agitate him, as though the calmness of another man served as a mirror that reflected back to him the noise and emptiness of his own performance. He laughed loudly, too loudly, interrupting the stillness in the cafe and drawing the attention of everyone inside. "Hey everyone, look at this man," he said, gesturing dramatically toward the janitor as if putting him on display. "Talking to the sky. Does your God even pay your bills?" The mocking tone in his voice was unmistakable, dripping with contempt rather than curiosity. Some customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes flickering between the businessman and the janitor, uncertain whether to intervene, to look away, or to pretend they had seen nothing. The janitor, however, did not respond. He remained still, his eyes closed, his hands lightly resting on his Bible, his prayer unbroken. The businessman, irritated by the lack of reaction, seemed to grow only more provoked. His need for control, for superiority, for acknowledgement, became almost palpable. He walked directly to the corner table, and with deliberate rudeness, he reached out and slapped the Bible off the table, the sound of it hitting the floor echoing sharply through the cafe like a sudden clap of thunder. Gasps rippled across the room. The atmosphere, once warm and quiet, now crackled with tension. "Do you really think someone up there cares about you?" The businessman sneered, his expression twisting into one of smug triumph, as though he believed he had proven some great point. The janitor slowly opened his eyes, the peace on his face not replaced by anger, nor fear, nor shame. He bent down, picked up his Bible with gentle hands, brushed off the dust from the cover, and then looked up at the businessman with steady, unwavering calm. "Sir," he said quietly, his voice soft but firm. "I respect you. Please respect my faith." The businessman scoffed, taking a step back as though the very words offended him. "Respect?" he repeated, his voice rising once again. "You are a janitor. I own 3 companies. Clearly your God does not bless you the way mine does." The air in the shop felt heavy now, as though every person inside was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next, their eyes fixed on the 2 men who stood as stark opposites of each other, one loud, wealthy, entitled, and puffed with pride, and the other quiet, humble, grounded in something deeper than wealth or recognition. Before any further words could be exchanged, Sarah, the cafe owner, stepped forward from behind the counter. She was a woman known by all the regular customers for her warmth, fairness, and steady presence, the sort of person who remembered everyone's favorite order and sensed when someone needed kindness without being asked. Her voice was calm, yet there was a firmness beneath it, a strength that did not need to shout to be heard. "Sir," she said, standing between the businessman and the janitor, "please do not disturb my customers." Her tone was respectful, but unwavering, like someone who had learned how to stand her ground in the face of arrogance many times before. The businessman let out a harsh laugh, a sound filled with disbelief and disdain. "Customers?" he said, gesturing again toward the janitor with dramatic mockery. "He's probably here begging for free coffee. You're defending someone who can't even afford a real meal." There was something in his voice now, not just arrogance, but cruelty, a need to diminish someone else in order to reassure himself of his own worth. Sarah did not flinch, her face calm, her eyes steady. She took a slow breath before responding. "Actually," she said, her voice smooth, "this man has paid for more than 50 meals for strangers in this shop this year alone." A hush fell over the room, deeper than before. The businessman's mocking grin froze, his mouth half open as though the words had been physically stopped mid-flight. A murmur of realization drifted between the customers, some nodding because they had seen it happen, others stunned to learn this for the first time. Sarah continued, her voice warm but firm, every word precise and undeniable. "He does it quietly. He does not announce it. He does not ask for thanks. He does not expect recognition. He simply does good when he can." The businessman blinked rapidly, as though reality itself had stumbled. "That must have been a mistake," he muttered, his voice suddenly uncertain, stripped of the confidence it carried only moments before. "Whether it was a mistake or not is not yours to decide," Sarah replied gently but firmly. "Wealth does not determine character, strength is not measured in money, and kindness does not require applause." The businessman's face flushed red, not with righteous anger, but with embarrassment, his pride cracking, his voice shrinking in the presence of evidence he could not deny. He grabbed his briefcase sharply, as though it were a shield that could restore the dignity slipping from his grasp, and without another word he turned and strode toward the door. His footsteps were quick and uneven, the earlier swagger replaced with a stiff tension. When he reached the door, he shoved it open, and the bell above it let out a loud, frantic jingle as it swung violently on its hinge. The door slammed shut behind him, the echo lingering in the air long after he was gone. The cafe remained silent for a moment longer, as if the room itself needed time to settle, like the surface of a pond slowly becoming still after a stone had been thrown into it. Then, slowly, life resumed. The soft clinking of cups, the quiet hum of conversation, the gentle low music playing through the speakers. The janitor, still seated in his corner, simply smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not a smug smile, but a peaceful one, warm and sincere, the kind that comes from a heart that has learned to hold steady amidst storms. He bowed his head once more and returned to his prayer, picking up exactly where he had left off, unbothered, unshaken, unwavering. His calm presence filled the room in a way that was almost tangible, like a quiet light that softened the air itself. Some customers glanced his way, not with pity, but with admiration, with respect, with a newfound understanding that humility is not weakness and that faith, real faith, is something powerful and steady, not easily disturbed by the noise of the world. Sarah watched him for a moment, her expression thoughtful, touched by something deep and human. something that could not be explained by logic or wealth or status. She understood what many others were beginning to realize in that moment, that real greatness is quiet. It does not need to shout. It does not need to be seen. It does not need applause to exist. It simply is. The janitor finished his prayer, opened his eyes, and took a small, grateful bite of his sandwich, as if nothing unusual had occurred, as if kindness and cruelty alike had no power to move him from who he was and what he believed. And in the gentle stillness that followed, one thought hung in the air, shared by everyone, though spoken by none. Real wealth is not measured by what you own, but by what you give. What no one in the shop knew, except Sarah, was that the janitor's quiet strength had been shaped over many years, through trials that would have broken someone who measured life by material success alone. His name was Michael, and he had once been a man with a very different life. Years ago, he had a stable job, a home filled with laughter, and a family who loved him dearly. He had a wife named Grace and a daughter named Lily, who had eyes bright enough to outshine morning sunlight. They had not been wealthy, but they had been happy, and happiness had been more than enough. However, life has a way of reminding us that the things we value most are not always protected from hardship. When Grace fell ill, their world shifted. The medical bills stacked higher than his paycheck could stretch, and he worked 2 jobs, then 3, doing everything he could to keep his family together. He prayed every night with the desperate sincerity of a man bargaining with fate. But even the most heartfelt prayers do not always bring the miracles we ask for. Grace passed away, her smile becoming a memory instead of a presence. And soon after, Lily, overwhelmed by the grief of losing her mother, withdrew into a quiet sadness her father could not reach. Michael kept working, kept trying, kept praying. But grief has its own currents, and they carried Lily away from him too, not in body, but in spirit. She left to live with relatives who believed they could offer her stability he no longer had the strength to give. Michael found himself alone, the home once filled with warmth now echoing with emptiness. Everything he had once believed was secure slipped from his hands, piece by piece, until all he had left was his faith. Many people, faced with loss like that, would have collapsed into bitterness, but Michael did not. He grieved, yes, how could he not? He cried in the quiet hours of the night when no one could see. He questioned life, questioned purpose, questioned the pain, but he never allowed his heart to harden. Somehow, instead of breaking him, his losses softened him. Instead of growing angry at the world, he grew gentler. Instead of seeing his faith as a shield that should have prevented suffering, he saw it as the strength that carried him through it. So he took a simple job as a janitor, not because he lacked the intelligence or skill to do more, but because he needed something steady, something calm, something that allowed him to heal quietly while still serving others in some small but meaningful way. And every day, he set aside a small portion of what little he earned to help others. Not because he had much, but because he understood what it meant to have little. That was why he paid for strangers' meals. That was why he prayed before he ate. His life had taught him that kindness is not something you give when you have abundance, but something you give because you know what it feels like to be without. The businessman, whose name was Jacob, lived a life opposite from Michael's. He had been raised to believe that success was measured only by visible achievements, money, property, influence, power. His father had been hard and demanding, a man who did not praise effort, only victory. If Jacob brought home a grade that was good, his father wanted it to be better. If Jacob achieved something others were proud of, his father dismissed it as ordinary. Love was not spoken in his home, value was earned. And so Jacob built his life as a relentless pursuit of proving himself, collecting accomplishments like trophies, stacking titles and businesses like proof that he mattered. But none of it filled the emptiness he carried. The louder he spoke, the more invisible he felt. The more wealth he gained, the hollower he became. His confidence was not real confidence, it was armor. His arrogance was not strength, it was a shield. And when he saw Michael praying that day, without shame, without fear, without concern for who was watching, something inside him felt threatened. Not because Michael was weak, but because Michael possessed something Jacob did not have. Peace. A peace that could not be bought. A peace that required no audience. A peace that came from knowing exactly who you are in the quiet places of your soul. That peace was what unsettled Jacob. That peace was what he mocked. That peace was what he did not understand. And as he walked out of the cafe that day, his expensive shoes clicking sharply against the pavement, the sound seemed to echo louder than it should have, as though the world were reminding him that he was walking away, not just from a moment, but from truth. He sat in his car for a long time, the engine off, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his reflection staring back at him from the rearview mirror. Exhausted, defensive, unsure. For the first time in a very long while, he did not feel triumphant. He felt small. Not because someone else had made him small, but because the mirror had shown him what was always there. And sometimes the most painful thing in the world is simply seeing yourself clearly. Inside the cafe, life continued in gentle rhythms. Michael finished his meal, stood up, thanked Sarah sincerely, and returned to his workday with the same quiet dignity he carried everywhere. Sarah watched him leave. Her heart warmed not because he needed sympathy, but because he was the kind of man whose presence reminded others what goodness looked like. A few customers went on with their conversations, but their voices were softer now, their thoughts more reflective. Something in the room had shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but deeply. It was the kind of shift that happens when a person witnesses truth, and truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. Real wealth is not in what we keep for ourselves. It is in what we give. Real strength is not in how loudly we speak. It is in how deeply we love. Real faith is not proven in public displays. It is lived quietly, consistently, authentically, regardless of who sees. And in the end, the lesson is simple. Kindness may not make noise, but it never goes unnoticed. Real wealth is in the heart, not the bank. Thank you for watching, and remember, respect is free. Give it generously. Drop a heart if you believe that faith deserves respect, that kindness is never weakness, and that the richest people are the ones who give, not the ones who demand to be seen. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share with your friends and family so you don't miss the next powerful story coming your way. Drop a heart and comment, like and subscribe my channel. And visit my channel for more interesting stories videos.